The intermittent howling had kept Janet awake the entire night. She felt cold chills giving her goose flesh over her body. If she did doze off, her imagination heard the beast scratching at the mudroom door or serenading her below the balcony. She'd wake up clutching the 357, drenched in nervous sweat. Around 3 a.m. she got up and went out on the balcony to await the next mournful wail from the wolf. Pistol in hand, she was ready to fire a shot in whatever direction it came from if it happened again. Feeling as though eyes were watching her, she thought about firing into the air. When the feeling abated, she thought better of waking everybody and went back inside. Tucking the pistol under her pillow, she knelt and asked God's help, but it was a restless night for the redhead. She was up, showered, and dressed well before sunrise. The second pot of coffee was brewing as she sipped the last of the first one. Janet normally avoided caffeine as much as she could, but today was one of those days where too much might not be enough. Her rattling around in the kitchen woke Mandy, who came out and started cooking 2 pounds of bacon for breakfast. The combined aroma of coffee and bacon aroused Ryan, who suspected his niece had not slept well. "Did you hear the howling last night?" was his first question. "How could I not?" his niece replied. "I figured you did. I'm sorry. We saw the wolf when I took the walkers to the bunkhouse last night. That's why I came back for the shotgun, but I didn't want to alarm you." "Why?" "I know how haunted you have been and wanted you to get a good night's sleep." "Well, that didn't happen, of course, and I barely slept a wink thanks to that dead animal." "What do you mean, dead animal?" "We thought it was dead a long time ago, and by God, it will be dead by the end of the day." "Oh," Brian said softly as he poured a cup of coffee and headed back to his room. Within minutes, he was dressed and back in the great room. "I'm going to go and get the walkers." "Breakfast will be ready when you get back," Mandy offered. "Thanks." The day's strategy was reviewed during breakfast. It was still an hour before dawn. Brian and Joe Walker were the first hunters to head out a few minutes before sunup. Armed with 30-30 deer rifles and holstered .45 caliber sidearms, they walked down to and past the pond toward the spot where Brian had seen glowing eyes last night. Their task was to find the wolf's tracks and follow them as stealthily as possible. 10 minutes after they left, Janet and Little Hawk were on their way to the barn. They saddled Peanut and Butter horses. They were going to ride to the owl's nest and then hike a circuitous route toward the wolf's den in the cliff. Janet slipped her .44 caliber Henry carbine into its scab behind Peanut's saddle, and she handed Hawk a 30-30 lever action like the ones Joe and Brian were carrying. He slid the rifle into Butter's scabbard, cinched the saddle tighter, and led the horse out of the barn. Janet was already outside and seated astride Peanut as he closed the door and mounted. She had left Paint secure in her stall. She was too precious to take on this adventure. That's her horse. By the time they loosened the reins and started the ride northwest, Brian and Joel had found the spot where the alpha male stood while he was howling. No words were exchanged, but they cast knowing glances at each other, confirming this was the place where the wolf taunted Janet. Walking in a staggered pattern a few yards on either side of the tracks, Joe and Brian started following the trail. As they were making their way toward the cliff face, Janet and Little Hawk had arrived at the owl's nest, dismounted, and tied up the horses. While Hawk stepped into the teepee to get his hunting knife, she checked the 500 to make sure every cylinder was full. She double-checked her 357 as well before they set out on foot. Hawk led the way. Janet kept back at a safe distance in case they were surprised. It was standard practice in wolf hunts. Little Hawk worked around to circle the wolf's den. He wanted to come up from behind in a downwind direction. When they got close, he motioned to Janet to stop and be still. He had frozen when he spotted the female. I got a minute left, standing outside the den. Slowly, Janet made her way up to Hawk. The whelp was now poking his nose out of the den as the mother stood guard. There was no sign of the alpha male, however. The hunters crouched down to shelter in place and wait. They kept a laser focus on the den and the 2 wolves, but did not move a muscle. The pup was wobbling on its feet. It was obviously only a few days old. Janet poked Hawk in the shoulder. When he looked over at her, she shrugged her shoulders as if to ask, "Where are they?" But she knew he would reciprocate. That's weird. He did with an "I don't know" shrug. Sensing the trickiness of the alpha male, she wondered if it had purposely chosen to lure Brian and Joel away from the den to protect the newborn whelp and its mother. After she had turned away, Hawk poked her in the shoulder. When she looked at him, he pointed to the south. Brian could be seen passing through the brush 200 yards away. Janet signaled they should move closer.